In the heart of Russia's Ural Mountains, 9 hikers embarked on a journey into the unknown. What happened next would become one of the most baffling mysteries in history. These were no ordinary adventurers. They were seasoned, capable, and well prepared. But what happened next would leave a mark on history, one that refuses to fade away. Just weeks later, their lifeless bodies were discovered under the most bizarre and unexplainable circumstances. The world would soon learn of the Dyatlov Pass incident, a chilling enigma that continues to haunt our understanding of the natural world. But here, on Deceptive Reality, we don't shy away from confronting mysteries. We embrace them, dissect them, and sift through the shroud of uncertainty with rigorous research. This is not just a story, it's a quest for answers. The Dyatlov incident may be shrouded in mystery, but through our lens, we will illuminate the path towards understanding. Welcome to Deceptive Reality, where the cold grip of the unknown meets the warm embrace of knowledge. Prepare to journey into the heart of the Dyatlov incident like never before.
Grasping the thin, almost translucent veil between that of fact and fiction. Revealing mysteries of the past, folklore passed down from father to son. Unsolved murders, and things that go bump in the night. You've entered Deceptive Reality.
So, I've got to say, this is a Nick week.
That's right.
I'm excited about Nick weeks. You know, I notice whenever I go back and listen to our podcast, of course, I edit our podcast also. But when I go back and I listen, I go, man, I'm always so much more animated when it's Nick's. And then I remember, oh yeah, I don't have to do anything with this story. It's all Nick.
Right. And when it's your week, I'm excited because I love being surprised. I mean, I don't edit the podcast anyway, so I haven't got anything to complain about. But I want to be told stories. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, oh man, it's so much fun. And speaking of stories, everybody, listen. Halloween is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
We need Halloween stories. We're obviously going to be doing a lot of social media. Let me see. When this comes out, when is Halloween, Nick? For us, it's 4 weeks. This will be out 1 week before Halloween.
All right. So you better.
You got a week?
Yeah, you got a week. You got to rush. I'm sorry to put you in the spot like this.
Listen, if you wouldn't have waited so long. Which, by the way, Rick, if you're watching this, look, I put on the Bigfoot shirt. Someone yelled at me about not having Bigfoot on. I put on a Bigfoot shirt just for this.
Yeah,
occasion.
you were telling me about that. I don't want you to get yelled at, so we're gonna have to work on something here.
We're gonna have to add something to the lineup. Listen, Rick, it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, we got one for you, Rick. We'll have it. We hope it meets your standards.
I mean, if it doesn't meet your standards, just don't let me know.
Well,
you let me know we didn't do Bigfoot.
You call him up and you blast him, Rick, if it's not up to your standards. He'll pass it on.
I'll forward it over to Nick, our complaints department.
Yeah. I'm the complaints department.
Which thankfully, Nick just set us up with an email address too that you guys can send that story. What's our email address, Nick? I've already forgotten.
Our email address is info@deceptiverealitypodcast.com.
Boom. Send your stories there. Obviously, you can do the social medias. You can do the direct messages if you prefer. Pretty much anywhere. You can let us know. Anywhere.
Yeah, we read them all. We read them all.
Oh, whether they're good or whether they're bad, we read them all.
I don't read the bad ones.
There was one that wasn't bad, but it was very naughty, and I still read it.
Yeah.
I laughed and sent it to Nick and was like, look at this person.
Yeah. I thought it was funny. Not to encourage that kind of thing, but I still
it was funny.
found it was funny.
I was giggling when I sent it to Nick. I'm like, look at this.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't want to encourage that, but it was funny. It wasn't negative.
It was funny. Stop being so naughty, viewers.
They're just rambunctious because they're anxious to hear these stories.
That is one way to put it. Rambunctious. That is true.
Yeah, I like that word.
Well, Nick, luckily, you only sent me the audio file today, so I'm assuming there's no pictures or video. Is that correct?
There is pictures in a separate folder, but I learned from the last time I named this file so you wouldn't know what it was. I
Yep.
put the pictures in a separate folder so you're not going to see anything.
Gotcha.
And I don't know, not a spoiler, but a warning. Some of the pictures are gruesome and we may not want to use them.
Gotcha. Okay.
But they're there for you to look at later.
Perfect.
You don't need to look at them during the episode. That's fine.
Perfect. We
don't
got
want
it.
to make you sick or something.
So again, yeah, we don't want to see me yak on camera, Nick. That'd be embarrassing.
Yeah, I know.
Now,
Yeah,
one
that
thing to
would be
remember,
embarrassing. I don't
everyone-
want that.
Yeah, no one wants that, Nick. Now, one thing to remember, obviously, if there's photos and it fits within the lines, we're going to put on Instagram, we'll put on Facebook. And I've been playing with the concept of Reddit. I don't know. I do different things on Reddit, but definitely Instagram, definitely Facebook. If it's too gruesome, we deem it not applicable. Just look it up yourself. I don't know what to tell you. Nick found it, so you should be able to find it.
Oh, yeah, it's easy to find. And another disclaimer I want to put too, and I think I speak for both of us in that, is sometimes when we research stories, if it has elements that are too gruesome or too descriptive and it doesn't really help the narrative, we'll leave that out and you can look that up yourself. Like sometimes there's facts that are not necessary to the story. And full disclosure, I've left out facts like that in this episode. I don't think they're important, but you can look them up as well.
And sometimes that happens. We just have to be careful because obviously the formats of where we put our podcast out. Obviously, a lot of our content is for mature audiences, but that said, YouTube does not necessarily like some of the content that's more gruesome. Being in the syndication loop with my own podcast now, I definitely know Apple does not like it. And Spotify does not like it. The rest of them I couldn't tell you, but when I was signing up for those two specifically, they made it very clear there could not be anything, which I'm blown away with because there's true crime channels on there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We are marked as mature.
Sure.
But we don't need to be excessive.
Correct. Yeah. 100%. So obviously, and again, if you guys give us stories and ideas, and just remember that, just remember sometimes they're a little bit too gruesome for us. So
don't say we didn't warn you.
Do not say that. Nick definitely told you twice I was here.
Yeah. Yeah. I've warned you there's a lot of gruesome things out there. And that might be a good segment. Do you want to get into a story that's more gruesome than I'm going to tell it to you as?
Okay. I am ready.
Let's do it.
Deep within the heart of Russia's sprawling Ural Mountains, a region cloaked in mystery beckons explorers and thrill seekers alike. While the Dyatlov Pass incident stands as a chilling testament to the area's supernatural occurrences, it is but one of many inexplicable tales that have emerged from this rugged landscape. The Ural Mountains, a vast expanse of untamed wilderness, have provided the backdrop for countless adventures. In the unforgiving winter of 1959, a group of 10 hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, ventured into these remote peaks, seeking camaraderie, challenge, and adventure. As the days passed, their journey took a dark turn. On January 28th, worsening weather conditions and illness forced Yuri Yudin, one of the hikers, to turn back, unknowingly sparing himself from a tragic fate. The remaining 9 hikers pressed on, reaching the slopes of Kalatsekl near Dyatlov Pass to make camp. Later, when the experienced adventurers did not arrive at their scheduled destination, a search party was quickly dispatched. What unfolded next remains a chilling puzzle to this day.
Have you heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident?
Oh, baby. I think I know this.
Oh, you know about this one.
I'm like 48.5% sure that I know this.
Well, let me ask you this. I know, and many people know you to be quite the gamer.
Yes.
Did you ever play the game Kolat?
No.
Very popular horror game. Sort of like a walking simulator that tells a lot of this incident. It's based on a lot of quote unquote true things that happened. And it's really not far off from what people say the truth to be. Beautiful game.
You know,
Sean Bean's in it.
I don't know who that is. Who's Sean Bean?
Oh, he's that guy who dies in every movie that he's in. Like in Lord of the Rings, he was it Boromir or?
Oh,
I think if you know the guy,
the young cat.
Game of Thrones. He was Ned Stark.
I got you now.
Yeah,
You know,
he was in
the
it.
only reason that I think that I know about this, man, I'm like 48%, 48 and a half. I just listened to a podcast and I went back to their very first episode, and that I'm pretty sure this is the man. If this isn't it, I would be shocked.
Oh, really? Did you listen to the whole podcast?
Yes.
Oh, I think it might be this. There's a little spoiler in that first segment that you didn't catch, but you heard the mountain, the range is called Kholat Syakhl.
Mm-hmm.
That means dead mountains. Yep, that's exactly what we're talking about tonight.
I know a little bit about this, Nick, just a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot to this, and we're going to get into some real wild stuff.
Now, to give you an idea, and everyone else, this podcast, I didn't obviously show you guys who the podcast was. It was an okay podcast. I didn't mind it. This podcast was only 15 minutes long. And he said he left 3/4 of it out. Now, the gruesome stuff you're talking about, I think I already know about that because I think that's all he put in his version.
And he did it in 15 minutes?
Part one. There's 3 parts. Only listen to part 1.
Oh, okay.
What he did was he covered everything in 15 minutes from beginning to end.
Right.
And then he's going back to part 2 and he's adding things to it that he didn't put in part 1. And then he had a part 3 where people asked questions and he revisited it.
Okay, that's an interesting way to do it. I like that.
I mean, it's different than what we do because we kind of cover the entire thing in one shot, lock and barrel. But yeah, this one is going to be a ride for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. And this is one of those topics where it can really be as long or as short as you need it to be. There's so many things going on. There's so many different things it could be. Stuff that probably hasn't even been explored yet, we'll probably get into because that's sort of our jam.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
But I just wanted to stop you at this part to see if you'd heard about it yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't have, and this was the first time I've heard about it was on this podcast. And honestly, the reason that I listened to this podcast, it was recommended on Podbean, which is where I distribute all my stuff. And
right.
This guy has like over 1,000 episodes. So I scrolled all the way to episode 1. And that's how I generally look at our podcast. How's our podcast doing versus, where did other people start? Because we're just starting, folks. I know we look like seasoned professionals, but we are brand spanking new. We're like a baby on this thing.
We're a fresh baby.
So I look at everyone else's beginning episodes, and then I look at our beginning episodes, which is where we are. I go, where are we at elevation wise? So that just so happens was episode 1, 2, and I believe 5. I can tell you episode 1, I was ticked off because I had so many questions at the end, which now you can answer. I've not listened to part 2.
Oh yeah. I know this really well. I know this really well. So any questions you have, I'm probably going to be able to answer.
I'm going to test you, Nick.
Test me. I
remember
dare
when
you
tested me on mine?
I know. You got most of them. System. I think you missed one.
I did. I'm putting your name at the top and I'm putting an over-under sign. Okay.
Now I'm nervous. No, I got this.
You got this, Nick. Yeah, I'm excited about this because there was a lot of questions I had on the last one. And I was going to honestly listen to part 2 this week. I'll still listen to his part 2 because I'm curious. But
Yeah. Compare it. I mean, this is all you need, but
he covered all the gruesome stuff in his. So this one's
I'm not going to do that. Just what's necessary.
For sure.
So let's get into the gore.
Oh boy.
We just got to the location and we found the body. Stand by.
Roger that.
On February 26th, a search team stumbled upon a haunting scene. An abandoned tent cut open from the inside. The opening to the tent was unblocked by snow and not stuck, leading many to believe that something terrifying may have barred that exit from the tent. The hikers' belongings were scattered about, and it was evident they had fled in panic. On February 27, 1959, 11 a.m., at a distance of 1.5 kilometers from the tent, Yuri Koptylov and Michael Sherevin found the first two bodies dressed only in their underwear, succumbing to the harsh cold. Hypothermia had claimed them. The bodies were of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. Neither Sherevin nor Koptylov were questioned during the later investigations. Was this part of a cover-up? Testimony from Yuri and Michael later described the scene of the first two bodies in more detail. The bodies were found at the base of a cedar tree. There was a fire pit in between the two. Their hands were broken and bleeding with many cuts between the fingers. Their mouths, ears, eyes, and nose were covered in blood. There were a great number of small fir trees cut down presumably for firewood. However, the searchers found it odd as the area was covered in dry wood and kindling right next to the fire even. Fresh fir trees would be known to be poor fire material by the experienced mountaineers. Further, the snow was packed down all over the area, which led the searchers to believe there were far more than just the two hikers in this location, though no other signs of people could be found.
So the first two bodies, let's start off with the tent.
Yep.
What did you think about that part? What was your theories about why they'd cut their way out of the tent?
So when I listened to the other podcast, I was of the assumption that they did not cut their way out, but something else cut its way in.
That, and I'm sorry, other podcast, that is false.
Yeah.
You can check out one of the authorities on this. I think it's Dyatlov.com or something similar. They have pictures from the investigation and everything. The hikers cut their way out of the tent about 3/4 from the back.
The only thing that would, in which I don't know how big this tent is, like how big is the tent?
The tent would probably be, this was like, it wasn't a very wide tent, but it was, I would say, probably 12 feet long.
Okay. So it's decent size. The only thing I could think is if they thought there was something at either the front or the sides then, and they was trying to escape without being acknowledged.
Right. And that's sort of the conclusion I came to, and a lot of other people have come to, because the front of the tent, it wasn't sealed or blocked anyway. They could have easily left that way, but they purposely took up knives and cut through the side to get out that way.
Now, when I listen to the rest, I know what should be coming up.
Right.
I did have a thought process that I will bring into the equation probably once we get a little further in.
Okay.
But if I didn't know this story at all, where we are, that would be my first assumption. I do have another theory on that, though.
Oh, okay.
But obviously, when we get a little bit closer, because I think it'll also play into a couple of other cases we're going to get into.
Well, we're going to, further on, we're going to explore what happened to everyone.
Yeah.
In here. So the other things I wanted to draw your attention to is two experienced hikers, mountaineers. They had not much time to flee.
Mm-hmm.
So they left. They were partially dressed, or mostly in their underwear. Now, have you ever heard of something called paradoxical undressing?
Yep.
So for anyone who doesn't know, that's where when your core temperature drops, you'll suddenly feel warmer. And if it goes too far, yeah, exactly. And some people who are actually freezing to death have been found to strip down.
Yep.
Now, I've had myself once my core temperature drop just slightly. And I've felt this kind of thing before, so I can easily imagine this happen.
I have heated vests, so I've never experienced this, folks.
Oh, yeah. I was not in a heated vest. So get those if you can.
And he's in Canada.
Right.
And it's cold
I'm
in
tough.
Canada.
That's why. I'm tough. That's why, but not that tough.
That was actually the theory I was going to, Nick,
Right.
because obviously the rest of the bodies were also found in this disarray of clothing. And I'm not going to give stuff away, but there's other things. And what my thought process is, another thing that happens when we talk about this is, for one, people think they're hot when they're really cold. So there's actually a mountain site where I forget how many people die each year when they do the expeditions up. And I forget what percentage they said, like 70% of the people are found frozen solid and in some form of naked.
Right. That's
and then
right.
In addition to that, typically they are, what was it? What do they call that? Basically their mental awareness above and beyond the heat, it's also off. So a lot of times they'll be talking to someone that's not even there. Like they'll find these people before they die and they'll be talking to someone. There's actually, man, what's that story called? It's a mountain where this keeps happening, and the theories, or the conspiracy theories behind it, it's not even conspiracy theory. It's, I guess you could say, a myth, is that they're talking to dead people that's already on the mountainside before they die. And a lot of times these people are going up going, you got to get up. You have to come with us. You need to put your clothes back on. You got to do this. And they're like, no, I'm just going to lay down and take a little nap. And then I'm going to
they're trying to help them.
And they die every single time.
Yeah.
They actually die. There's actually a really cool story about that mountain where I think there's, I don't know. I can't say I believe it, because if I do, everyone's going to be like, Bert believes everything. But it was a woman. It starts out, someone's telling the story about the mountain. Similar situation. I can't remember where this mountain's at. I'll look this up for the next podcast. I think
I've heard of this, so I'm going to validate this is a real thing.
Well, there's a couple that was on an expedition. The woman was one day ahead of them. And she started having this condition occurring. Because what happens is they would go, there are so many people go on day 1, so many people go day 2, so many people go day 3. And what's supposed to happen is, if someone gets stuck, then the other, whatever, the tour people will help them get to the top of the summit.
Right.
This couple find this woman, and she's very much undressed. She's not wearing a whole lot. And they're like, what are you doing? And they knew what this was, because it's not uncommon. And when they was talking to her, she's like, no, I'm fine. And she's like, I'm talking to my friend, and there's nobody else there.
Right.
And whatever this was told her that she had a tumor, and the tumor was somewhere in her back or like her side or something. They talk her into going to the top of this summit. She goes to the doctor, and there's a tumor exactly where this thing told her it was.
Wow. That's
wild.
It's a
great story. But the theory is that their brain has something that's off when it gets, the core temperature gets so low, which is what you're talking about, which is what I thought with all these people in the story based on the other. That's why I'm like, we'll come back to it later. But since you mentioned it, here we are.
Oh, yeah. So one purpose of me mentioning it as well is, typically once you get to paradoxical undressing, just as in the story you just told, you don't just snap out of it unless conditions improve or you get some medical help.
Right.
Like your core temperature will continue to drop and you'll continue to feel hot, and it'll get worse and worse. So this is one of the main theories. However, there's already one part that discredits that. And this is that they have built a fire and they're trying to warm up after moving 1.5 kilometers from the tent. So they've gotten there. They've got the presence of mind. They're going to build a fire. They've cut down all these trees, which were not much good. They didn't really help them but they've built a fire. What wasn't in the narrative is they had pulled on extra layers of socks that they must have grabbed on their way out. So they had started to dress after they left the tent. And if they were feeling the effects of paradoxical undress, and they wouldn't have done that, and they wouldn't have started a fire. So that's a couple interesting things there. Plus, in the same location, even though everyone sort of ran off in groups in different directions from the tents, there was a huge amount of ground padded down in that area. Although they didn't find any evidence of other people, they said there was probably about 10 or 15 people there, they had thought. Which is very odd.
They didn't cover it on any other podcast. I didn't know that.
There's a lot to this. That's why I was kind of like, they covered the whole thing in 15 minutes. Sounds dubious, but people are going to listen to our podcast, and we're probably going to end up around an hour and change, or 15 hours knowing us. People are going to say they missed this, they missed that, they missed the other thing, because I know I'm going to miss some stuff. I tried to include the best I could.
This is a big story. And that's why I'm a little scared to mention too much stuff, because I don't know what you've got in your narration. And I know some things that we've not mentioned yet where I'm like, that's odd. Yeah. So there's a lot of weird things that I'm sure even if you don't mention it, I'm going to have those questions in my head anyway. So
right.
Hopefully
and you can ask them because,
yeah,
we're solving it too. We're solving it too. But the other thing I want to mention is we've already learned that one thing in that other narrative wasn't true. And that is there is physical evidence that they cut their way out of the tent.
Yeah.
Not something cutting in.
So you didn't mention any of the aspects, but the way he let it to be assumed, I thought something cut in. So either he didn't explain that to the point to where I would come to that conclusion, or I misunderstood what he said, which is entirely possible also.
Yeah, could very well be. Now in popular media, because there's movies and games off of this, like I mentioned, they all portray it as something came into the tent after them. So that might be where some confusion gets in, but they have done pretty intense investigation showing the cut patterns, the way the fibers are bent, all this kind of stuff. So it's definitive that they cut their way out.
Makes perfect sense to me. You told me an aspect I didn't know. Two. There's a lot of things, man. This one's got a lot of different, there's a lot of, when I was listening to it, things where I'm like, how does that make any sense whatsoever?
Right. I always approach these, and I think I've said this before in our other episodes, I try to approach these where I imagine myself in the situation and try to think, what would it take me to cut out the side? So for me, that's something horrifying at the opening of the tent. But one thing you brought up is it could be at the side of the tent as well. And I would be worried about the front, because cutting out through the side instead of the back of the tent. So if something's at the front, I'd cut my way out the back to be as far from it as possible.
Correct.
You mentioned something might be at the side, or maybe the side and the front. So that means the opposite side is the furthest possible.
Correct. Yeah, that's the way I pictured it is, if it was cut out from the side, if it's me and I'm just trying to dip, I'm going to cut the furthest possible direction from whatever it is to give me as much time as possible to get ahead.
Yep. And you've also made me think of another piece of quote unquote evidence that might support that is if we cut from the side, if we cut from the back, everyone in the tent gets to pass through all their equipment and they can grab extra pieces as needed. If they cut through the side, there's a huge portion of the people who are going to have to get out without having the opportunity of grabbing anything.
Yeah, that's
and this
true.
Could explain the different states of undress they're all in.
Makes perfect sense.
See, you're making me think about this deeper, and I've known about this for years.
Now, the important question that we have to ask Nick, and I've got to put it in my journal here because I've got a notepad, everybody, again.
Oh, yeah. And a clicky pen?
No more clicky pens. I've got a clicky pencil. It's on the side.
Right.
For anyone that doesn't know, inside joke, one podcast I just kept going click, 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 click. I had to edit every one of those clicks out in audio, so we will never be allowed to have a clicky pen ever again. The one thing, Nick, that my brain needs to really kind of wrap itself around at this point. Did this happen in a national forest in Russia, the equivalent of a national forest? I know it's a mountain range.
You have asked this too soon.
Is it coming up?
We'll talk more about it later, but right now I'm going to say no.
Okay.
But there's buts to this. Buts and buts. Fields of buts. So we're going to come back to this later, but I wanted you to ask that question. I just thought you might ask it later.
Well, now it's part of my let's eliminate this possibility thing. It's kind of
we're
like
not eliminating it.
Well, when I do like my research, when I do my stuff, there's a series of check marks that I have to put to where I go, this makes sense. This makes sense. If something doesn't click that check mark, I have to understand the why now. With us,
all right,
I always have to know if there's a national park involved. That's just one of my check marks now.
And it's going to become important to this later on.
Yes.
Oh, Nick. Yeah.
We're so good at this, Nick.
I know. I feel like our podcast is almost like a serial drama where we've uncovered something and we keep revisiting it, finding more connections until it becomes dangerous for us and we have to go on the lam.
See, I see this, Nick, like that. But in addition to that, I see it as one day the FBI is going to say, Bert and Nick, need you to follow us. You guys are figuring out too many of these cases. We're going to hire you full time. And then our podcast is over. Everyone's going to be like, why'd they quit their Where did they go?
I don't think they're allowed to hire me. Don't you have to be born in the U.S. to work for the FBI?
Nope, not now. Not with our level of knowledge, Nick. They can't bring in one without the other. They can't have frick without frack.
Don't go without me, man. Please.
Yeah.
I want to.
I mean, look at it. Cadney and Lacey. I don't know which one I want to be. Turner and Hooch.
I'm Hooch.
Dang, I was hoping to be the dog.
You can be the dog. And again, Mulder and Scully.
Exactly. Everyone knows I'm the Mauler. Listen, you can be Scully. It's fine, Nick. Listen,
yeah.
18 episodes. We'll get you there. Don't you worry about it.
Yeah, that's right. I'll turn the corner, I'm sure.
Now, are we going to somebody else next, or are we staying with these guys for a minute?
These guys are gone. We're done with them.
So I'm pretty sure I know it might be, man, I'm scared to ask because it might not be these two.
Ask anyway.
Their hands that they talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Was there another set of gentlemen with hands like that?
I'm glad you asked that. Everyone's was like that. Every single person.
So one of the cases, or in this case, one of the situations that was talked about, and I don't know if it's these gentlemen or someone else, was they tried to get up a tree so bad that they found fragments of their flesh in the bark of the tree where they tried to climb it. Something scared them so badly.
That is an amalgamation of another. It is these two guys.
Okay.
That is. But in more recent times, they've said that this was them pulling pieces off the tree for their fire instead of scrambling up the tree.
Dude, it was like a lot of flesh up in that tree.
From my sources, it didn't seem like that much.
The last podcast acted like it was all like chunks of flesh in the tree.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
Okay.
That sounds a little more sensational than this is, but I'll check on that more.
Some podcasts, Nick, listen, they sensation. Not around here, folks.
Right.
We keep it straight and narrow.
So just I guess just a full disclosure, I'm basing the injuries of each of these people on the autopsy reports.
Okay.
Which not only show each injury, but also itemize them and also have the human form where it's marked each injury spot on them.
Okay.
So I did not read that.
Is this a case like Ron Gillespie where they changed it, Nick?
It could be, because there's like the narrative already said was this part of a cover up, because the entire report of these two gentlemen that they found, the guys who found them were never interviewed by the government.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They weren't even talked to. They gave this to reporters and such later. In fact, one of the two people that found these ones went in the hospital shortly thereafter and was surprised that he was never visited by any government officials or anything. And he talked to the other gentleman afterwards, Michael, and he said, no, they've never talked to me again about it since.
That drives me crazy.
Right. Because you can, that would clearly be something they want in the official report.
I would assume so.
Right?
Listen, when I learned door-to-door sales when I was just a youngin', they said always go to the neighbor's house because you don't know if the neighbors are willing to buy. Why would you not use that same concept?
Right.
In investigations.
So there are a lot of things that have led people to believe there's some kind of cover-up going on.
Further searching revealed more bodies strewn along the path between their campsite and the forest, as if they had desperately attempted to return to the tent. These were the bodies of the group leader Igor Dyatlov and two others, Zenaida Kolmogorova and Rustam Slobodin. These three were fully clothed as opposed to the ones found by the cedar tree. These had similar injuries to those by the tree, however they had significant amount of blunt force trauma, but only to the front of their bodies and none to the back of their skull or the rest of their bodies. While there were no indications of an avalanche, this further discredits that theory. The ultimate cause of death, however, was of exposure. An additional theory was that escaped convicts had murdered the group, as it was found their bodies had been rolled over after death. However, there were no indications of further human assault of any kind.
So here's the thing, and I didn't put this in here because I wanted to talk about it. Throughout this whole thing, there's a real weird injury pattern, and it mentions it here, but I didn't mention it on the previous ones. All the injuries to all the hikers are on the front of their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
The only exception is the palms of their hands and between their fingers. So I feel like that is relevant because of something we'll find out a little later on. But what are some causes you can think of for this?
Without knowing any of the rest of the story?
Yeah, let's just theorize on this for a second. So tumbling down a hill, a fall, an avalanche, you're going to injure both sides of your body. And the greatest problem is hitting the back of the head.
So I have a little bit of a story around this because I've experienced that somewhat, Nick.
Yeah.
So for anyone that doesn't know, back in the days, I used to go out and do some rambunctious things. So a buddy of mine one year decided he wanted to take me hunting. We went to Hocking Hills. Now, for those of you that don't know, there's a topography that when you look at it on a map, you go, man, that thing is like really kind of steep right there. Well, trying to cross over to where I thought there might be some little male deers hanging out, I slipped and fell what seemed like an eternity. That was the longest trip down the side of a cliff. Not, I say cliff, that's an exaggeration, similar to my bass stories when I go fishing. When I tumbled down this hill, it was a little bit more rough than what would be assumed. But all my injuries typically was all around. And I didn't get hurt real bad from it because it was wintertime. I had winter clothing on. But like it was steep. Like I was hitting bushes on the way down.
Right.
So to
But
be one side of the body,
you
that
were
makes
hitting
no
both
sense.
sides, right? Yeah, you were
Do what?
hitting both sides.
I
Both
was
sides of
hitting
your
every
body,
side.
like you're bouncing off your butt, hitting your head,
yeah.
stomach, everything, probably.
For sure. Yeah. 100%. It was bad.
Right.
It was rough. I was sore the next day.
Yeah. And if there was an avalanche, you get tumbled around just like that kind of thing. But there's never been any evidence of any avalanche in this whole story. The tent was always uncovered. They didn't have to dig for the tent. None of the bodies were injured on the opposite side, so they weren't tumbling down hills. So we're talking only front of body injuries, except for the hands, which if defensive wounds is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But all to the front of their bodies.
Without seeing the injuries, defensive wound is the first thing that comes to my mind.
Right. Because that's the part you would lift. So that's facing towards whatever's happening to you.
Oh, so, for sure. See, I have at the end of this, I already feel like I know the answer to this.
Right.
But I have to pretend like I don't know what's coming up.
I think you probably do, but we'll find out. So these ones, these were trying to return to the tent after some time.
Yeah.
And this group of people were mostly clothed.
Yes.
One interesting piece is the lady had taken a sweater off another one of the men who must have died first. And I think it was one of the men that was at the tree. So I think we've completely blown the paradoxical undressing out of the water. So I sort of want to remove that from everything.
It was very odd when I heard the fact that, because she's not the only one that has someone else's article of clothing on, correct?
Right. They've all got different pieces from different people.
Yeah, which was very odd because when I think of something that's happening very quickly, there was no time for this to have occurred. Not only that, but their bodies were spaced out relatively far enough.
Right.
And initially, when I first heard this story, the first thing that crossed my mind, bear, right? This is a bear attack.
Right.
But then I'm like, a bear's going to eat somebody.
Right.
Like a bear is a very different animal. A bear will eat you while you're still alive.
Yeah. And they'll scratch you.
Right.
And probably more than just on the palms of your hands.
Correct.
They don't typically carry clubs, so the blunt force trauma isn't going to be such a thing. Right. And there was lots of that.
But if a bear, let's use for example, like if a bear hits you hard enough, it's like a linebacker hitting you with full pads on. And you don't have
that
pads.
Is true.
So
that is true.
Bears are a very different type of animals. They're strong, they're fast.
Right.
And they can do anything. They can climb trees. They can run significantly faster than a human. Like I've been hunting before where I knew there were bears at, and that's a very scary, like of all the animals that I could potentially run into in the wild, a bear is not one of them.
Yeah. And in that area, it's not typically small black bears, I don't think.
No. They're man eaters.
Yeah. I don't feel like there's a ton of evidence for that. No. When you look at the injuries later, like a bear could cause blunt force trauma, but they don't typically run through you, knock you down, and then just leave you be.
Well, there's one huge thing that definitely tells you it's not a bear, but we've not gotten that far yet.
Yeah. Well, these ones weren't partially ready.
Right.
To that.
They just had the injuries.
They just had the injuries. However, there's from time to time escaped convicts that tried to make their way through here. And they thought, well, somehow this could be related to an escaped convict because the bodies had been rolled over and moved post-mortem. And one thing I kind of was vague about in the description is one of these was a lady. And they said, and this is them saying this, that they would have expected the convicts to have performed SA on her.
Yeah.
Had it been them.
Wasn't she also missing things?
Not her.
Okay, it was someone else.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Because there's two ladies in this group.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So
for
she
anyone that's got a dirty mind, don't be putting nothing weird in our comments. It's not that. It's not that. It's something else.
Yeah, you'll see. It's not anything that you're thinking, you dirty-minded folks.
No, you dirty-minded sickos.
Yeah, but the second most mysterious part about these ones is they were heading back to the tent, and post-mortem they had been rolled over, or actually wasn't post-mortem. It was they had been rolled over as they were dying and then afterwards.
So
and they can tell that by the pooling of blood or stuff, and it's all in the autopsy. I can't explain it well because I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV.
Exactly. I've played one of video games before.
Yeah, it's hard work.
It's hard work.
Yeah, so
very odd.
Yeah, this was very odd. These are the least, like the middle group was the least mysterious I found. The first group was very mysterious, and the third group is going to be very, very mysterious. So do you want to learn a little bit more about them?
You doggone right I do, Nick.
Yeah, roll the tape.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
However, the most horrifying discovery awaited in a snow-filled ravine. There, beneath 13 feet of snow, lay the remaining 4 hikers. Their injuries were gruesome: fractured skulls, broken ribs, and one victim missing her tongue and eyes. This area was called the Den. It was found later by a Mansi native who noticed a trail of branches with clothing tied to them. This was a common tactic amongst hikers in peril to alert searchers to their presence. The remaining hikers had dug a den beneath the snow and huddled together to keep warm. It was later said that the hikers had done everything in their power to survive, but it was impossible to guess why it had not worked. It further undermines the theory of paradox undressing. The group clearly realized their threats and did everything they could to preserve themselves. Cedar branches were brought here and laid out to minimize contact of human bodies and cold snow underneath. Furthermore, Ludmila Dubinina had sweater and pants of Krivonishenko. All clothing of the survivors had abnormally high radiation present on them.
That's what I was talking about, Nick.
Yeah,
that's what
those were the missing pieces, literally. So here's an interesting part. All the clothing of all these people abnormally high in radiation.
Yes.
Blunt force trauma to the fronts of their bodies.
Yes.
And their hands in defensive wounds.
Correct.
With little cuts and stuff.
Yeah.
It's theorized that is from some sort of explosion.
No.
No?
Nope.
What are you thinking?
No, I already know what this is, Nick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, do you want me to screw this up for all the listeners and stuff right now? Because I already know the answer. Well, technically, we could stop the podcast right now. I'm already done.
Oh, really?
I don't even need to use my notebook no more. Yeah, 100%.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Go ahead, please. Yeah, go ahead. So
I played this video game a long time ago. It was called Alien versus Humans.
Okay.
This, for anyone that doesn't know, this is a UFO story. Okay. There's aliens and they've got this gun. And when you shoot the gun, it goes like a big, huge, like sonic blast. Okay.
I
actually figured this out on the first podcast also. So don't think that I couldn't have figured this out with 15 minutes of information. I figured out just enough to go, this is literally what I don't have proof of this. The video game clearly was created based on this story and they just never gave it recognition. But the alien runs around, he's got this gun, he goes, poof, and it goes like that. Maybe I'll add sound effects.
Right.
And what ends up happening is you see the people fly back. That is what we're talking about because there was internal damage.
Right.
The video game didn't talk about internal damage, but I think it's pretty obvious. Okay. Radiation, again, they don't talk about in the video game. They got little alien guns. Of course, there's going to be radiation. Everyone stop being so dumb. Come on. Radiation.
I think you just
from the
wanted to
ray
make
gun.
that sound effect, is what it sounds like right now.
Like that. So yeah, 100% UFO story. I'm already done with this. We can move on to the next case. You got another one?
Not ready. Maybe we should look at this a little more.
Fine, Nick, fine. But no, the theory that I have, obviously that's all in puns and jokes.
Yeah.
The fact that there's a radiation honestly goes back to two different theories. Now, I do believe that this is some form of a UFO story again. And the reason I say that's not based on the video game, though, that is true. What I said about aliens versus humans, I think is the name of the video game. That does happen. He does have a ray gun. But
right.
What I believe is happening, and this goes back to our boy Bob Lazar. If you've not watched those episodes, go watch them. He talks about the technology that's coming from a lot of these quote unquote alien aircraft or spaceships or spacecraft, whatever you want to call it. They work significantly different than ours. What I think could have plausibly happened based on the information I know now. If I didn't know anything about this except for up to this point, without hearing the words, I'd go, this is a UFO story. A spaceship came down, and that's some form of a defense for the spacecraft. So I believe at this point, aircraft came down, spacecraft, whatever, lands. And there's a story, a famous UFO story where a UFO was attacked and it sent out this, like, I don't know what you call it, like a pulse. Like a pulse. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. But in that case, also people had, it was a guy and then like 2 or 3 other people, and they all had high levels of radiation, but they had the same wounds.
Right.
They didn't die though, but they disappeared for 3 days. And then when they remembered waking up, they found themselves in this forest. It was a famous story. I can't remember what it was, but they also had the same.
Was this the Rendlesham Forest incident?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well because there was radiation in that.
Correct.
Also.
Radiation. And they had blunt trauma.
That's right. And I think they only tried to touch the thing, and that's what triggered.
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
Defense.
Like, they was going up, they was trying to do something to the ship. Yeah. And the ship was like, woof. But when they woke up, they thought it was the same night, but it was like 3 days later or something.
Right. Well, what's interesting that you bring that up is, what if you're in an extra harsh environment and you get knocked out and 3 days pass? You're in a bad situation. You are in a bad situation.
Yeah.
They were
bad. Off.
In a compared to this situation, the Rendlesham Forest one, they were in like a balmy English forest where you could go to sleep on a clump of moss and be fine for a few days.
Correct.
This one here, they all ended up dying of exposure despite their wounds. No one died of anything but exposure. However, do you remember the earlier part where it said they took all the precautions they could to save their own lives, but it was impossible for people to figure out why it didn't work?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So considering the weather at the time, considering all the things they did with fires, with making a den, with covering the ground so they're off the wet snow and the cold, why didn't it save them exposure? Could it have been that they were knocked out for a number of days and this was the last bit of their strength and they were already too far gone? Is that possible? Well,
they also created the thing though to get found, the clothes on the sticks.
Right. But did that happen on their last day? Like, did they wake up after 2 days of exposure, use the last of their energy to do this stuff?
I would have thought they would have died though. Like, what's the temperatures like?
Well, that's what I'm thinking as well. So it's hard to reconcile these things because all the things they did, they should have been able to last days and days.
Yeah, that's very true. Did they test the ground for radiation, Nick?
Not that I'm aware of. There was no record of them testing the ground. And I'm not sure why they tested the clothes.
Yeah, that's very odd. Why would you test the clothes? That doesn't make any sense.
That's something I hadn't considered further because they weren't burned.
Correct.
The people weren't burned. So what persuaded them to just check the clothes?
Because it's a cover-up, Nick. We already discussed this.
Yeah.
Cover-up, baby.
In the near future, we're going to talk about some of the things that they might want to cover up.
Oh. We're doing their job for them, Nick.
Yeah, that's right. But this den, I've heard many stories of people doing dens just like this, and even ones where they're not covering the floor like they did, which was a very wise move on their part. And people have lasted 5 to 7 days like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Not to mention, they were sealed in this den. What happened to the eyes and tongue?
Correct. Yeah, no, that's from the aliens. The aliens took those with them.
Yeah, or something to that effect. Maybe not the alien gun, but...
Well, think about it. When they find, and I caught that joke, Nick. Moms, don't even stop.
Everyone gives you such a hard time.
I know. Everyone likes Nick. They're like, Nick's the cool one.
Well,
I'm second hat. I'm second hat.
Nah. They're just giving you a hard time because they love you.
Yeah, right. Sure, Nick. The cows, when those are typically, there's a video, and I'm trying to decipher if I think it's real or fake, but if you think about it, a lot of those cases, the cows were missing their eyes and their tongues.
Yep, that's correct. The cattle mutilations.
Because a lot of times they would say, well, it's an animal eating it, but it's like an animal's not going to eat just the eyes and just the tongue. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, they say they do go for them first, but they left everyone else in this case. Now, what they didn't cover in the autopsy was whether there was surgical precision or not, which is often what's found in the cattle mutilations, surgical precision. Yeah. And I wish they would have went into more detail on that, but they didn't.
Dang it.
Yeah.
That was going to be my next question, Nick. You screwed that up. Well, dang. Yeah, there's something up with that. Again, I think it's UFOs. I think it's so weird that a alien's going to come from wherever it comes from and just be like, well, let's take this organ and see what this looks like. That's and it's always like weird stuff.
Yeah, they must have enough of them by freaks. Now. Yeah. Well, how many of these do they need?
Yeah. And why does everyone, get the whoosh?
All right.
That's weird.
You don't need to be doing that.
You don't need to be doing that. There's nothing there that, trust me, for anyone that's
unless
listening,
it's like a running joke.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be like,
they're like, no one's going to believe them.
For
people are going to question this.
That's not watching. We put a glove on.
Yeah.
And then we use one finger for things that happens. That's aliens like to do that weird stuff, which makes no sense.
Stir in the coffee. That's what it is. If you're young and you're listening, that's what it is. Stir in the coffee.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you interested in more?
Yeah, you best.
I know you've solved it, but
I've already solved it, Nick.
Let's get into a little more.
Okay, I'm not changing my hypothesis though. Let's go. Okay.
The investigation into this tragedy was as puzzling as the incident itself. Authorities concluded that the hikers had perished due to a compelling natural force. The case was officially closed, but unanswered questions remained. Statements were often not gathered from searchers, even those first on each scene. Over the years, numerous theories and speculations arose, each attempting to shed light on the Dyatlov Pass incident. Some proposed an avalanche as the culprit, citing the damaged tent and injuries. However, experts questioned this theory as the telltale signs of avalanches were absent. Injuries were so localized to be absolutely inconsistent with such, and the damage to the tent was caused by knives from the inside out. Others explored the eerie world of infrasound, suggesting that low-frequency sound waves from natural phenomena could have triggered panic and disorientation. Conspiracy theories also swirled, with some suggesting that the hikers had stumbled upon military testing grounds, leading to their deaths and a subsequent cover-up. The phenomenon of paradoxical undressing, where hypothermia victims removed their clothing due to a misguided sensation of overheating, was also considered as a possible explanation for the hikers' state of undress. The possibility of human involvement was not ruled out. Some believe that another group of hikers or indigenous people in the region may have encountered the Dyatlov group and been involved in their deaths.
I swear to God, if it's not owls, it's always someone else. They're like, well, must have been these natives here.
Yeah, I really was hoping that they'd say something about owls, but they did.
Let me tell you, I would have quit the podcast, Nick. If I hear owls and something like this, I'm like, come on, man. Listen, no owls are taking eyes and tongues out of people. That makes no sense.
Yeah, they got their own.
It's interesting because surprisingly enough, I do research for my podcast too. For the first time ever doing research on that side, infrasound was brought up on this week's episode, which will already be out. So I'm fine talking about it. And what it is the Shanghai tunnels is what that episode's about. And because it's underground, there is a certain frequency range, which they say manipulates the human mind to a point to where they can be, I guess for better words, become a little crazy.
Does it trigger sensations or feelings?
The way they explained it is people will see and hear things potentially that's not there.
All right. I'm glad you can explain this better because I didn't know much about what this was.
So we use it in cinematography now. I'm not going to go into too much of it because I might do it myself from time to time, but infrasound is a frequency range that's between 16 and 19 hertz. So it's technically what's right below the human hearing. The human hearing, I think, for really good hearing starts around 30 something, 30, 33, 36, 38, something like that.
Okay.
That's the lowest possible.
Right.
So once you get to 16 and 19, so what happens is supposedly over the years of evolution that we've had, when Earth was just settling in the creation of the Earth, earthquakes was occurring, volcanoes was erupting.
Right.
And what we don't know is when that occurs, there is typically a hertz range, which is deep within the Earth, of 16 to 19 hertz. That's why they believe some animals will run from areas days before these events occur.
I've heard of that before.
Yeah. And they say it's based on the hertz range. So there's a frequency that the animals can hear that we can't as humans. But they believe at one point in time in our evolution, we were capable of it.
Right.
So now our body feels it. We can't hear it. We can feel it. But the same psychological process is happening because we have to run.
Right. Does the content of the sound make any difference? Like, is this what they did in The Exorcist?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if everyone who's listening knows, but in The Exorcist, they played sounds from our primal evolutionary fears, which was lions growling, bees buzzing, which would definitely terrify me. And it really caused a lot of problems for the audience. So that's a trick. A
lot of times they didn't understand what they were listening to. They just knew they were getting sick and they couldn't figure out why they were getting sick. And what a lot of people doesn't know, if you've ever watched any of the Paranormal States, is that the name of the movies? It's like
Paranormal Activity. Yeah.
Yeah. Every single one of those episodes has the 19 hertz frequency played.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So from minute one, it's at 1% elevation. And by the halfway point of the movie, it gets up to 48% of total volume.
Wow.
Once you get to 3/4 through the movie, it goes from that all the way to 85%.
Right.
And then it tapers back off at the end.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. If you take the old movie reel from Paranormal Activity,
Mm-hmm.
you take it home. We're talking about not theatrical release. We're talking
Right.
actual audio, and you have Bose speakers. You can see the speaker moving, but no sound coming out. That's the actual
Really?
frequency range. Yeah.
This is fascinating. So we all know from experiencing these things that this can trigger different feelings or anxieties in you. So we know this is a fact. So there could be stronger ones out there naturally occurring.
100%. Yeah. Like I say, this just came up on the Shanghai tunnels, and they said that they've scientifically proven that frequency range does occur there. And they tried to disprove it. Skeptics disprove the paranormal based on that. And technically speaking, there's been film work that I've done, that I've put out, that I've put that frequency range in the specific films, or potentially podcasts that I've released. I've done that myself.
Interesting.
Just to test it.
And what's your experience been? It's been successful, huh?
So I'm the one that creates my content.
Right.
I always listen to it without, and then I listen to it with, and I always feel different. Now, part of that could be placebo. But the thing that I've been playing around with the most in my podcast, sorry for all those, I kind of pulled the curtain back on you guys, but I've been testing volume ranges, because there comes a point in time where if you look at the spectrum analyzer, you can see there's a frequency that's added, but you can't hear it. So if you're looking at decibels, what typical background noise is for most of our recordings is like negative, 48 decibels.
Yeah.
When you add a lot of volume, so like if I pump in a 19 decibel frequency range, and I turn it up to 80%, the background noise is going to look like it's like negative 18, negative 12, but you don't hear anything.
Right. Yeah.
So it can happen, and it does have an effect. In my personal opinion, it has a big effect.
For a lot of this could be a plausible explanation, not the injuries, the physical injuries, however, but this could have driven them from the tent. What if the sound is, and I'm going into aliens here, like I'm not someone who always says aliens, everything, but let's play it into the narrative that you were talking about.
Yep.
Alien craft comes down. It produces this noise at a certain frequency. Those inside the tent, essentially driven crazy from it, cut their way out of the side of the tent. Perhaps they see this craft. They have no concept of what it is. Russia in that time probably doesn't have a lot of UFO stories. They approach it just like they do in Rendlesham Forest. They attempt to touch it, blast. They shield themselves, but they suffer blunt force trauma. Maybe the person who actually touched the craft was close enough that it did something to the tongue and eyes. What have you there? They all take off in opposite directions. And this sort of explains the whole thing, the radiation, everything. To me, that sounds fairly reasonable.
Well, not only that, but think about it. Like we use, government-wise, we use some of this technology now.
Right.
So we've experimented with hurt ranges as a viable weapon. If we figure that out and these aliens are so advanced, who's to say that they also have not created a defense?
Right. Or it could even be a byproduct of their landing cycle. Because I know in the Bob Lazar thing, he said it makes a noise until it gets to a certain, altitude.
Yeah. Well, it's that plasma. So it creates a plasmic, what does he call that?
Like a hum or something.
Yeah, it's that blue light. I can't think of what that lighting is called. It's basically, no, it's got a specific name. But basically what he's saying is it's creating the gravity, which changes the elements of what's in our actual environment, which causes the blue haze. Now there's a theory, not with Bob Lazar, but I've heard theories of when you create that, it also gives off potentially a light form of radiation.
Right. Okay.
So that also, I guess, would fit. Another thing, if you think about it, if they had a defensive weapon, people land when their bodies obviously, these injuries just occurred. I could see where if it was a alien, they're rolling over the bodies to see if the person is dead or not.
Right.
And then putting them back. So I guess technically that fits too in the narrative.
Yeah, that could fit all of it. The government facility doesn't fit because this is a super common trail that people hike through. This is like if you put Area 51 down the main strip in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Like wouldn't make
but
much
in
sense.
addition to that, why would they do this? That doesn't make any sense at all. Like they wouldn't, I would assume they wouldn't want that kind of publicity.
Right. It just wouldn't add up. That doesn't add up, I don't think.
Not like that. Why would they remove eyes and a tongue? That makes no sense. Like that's something a human thought process wouldn't even have.
Yeah. So I think we can eliminate that, but I think the low frequency sound, we can keep that and keep the whole rest of that theory, but drop everything else from this little section.
Agreed.
Doesn't seem plausible. Now, the next section, I'm going to give you a little preview, and I want you to keep some things in your mind.
Okay.
And this is in regards to our running theory on protected areas and national reserves and stuff like that.
Okay.
Because there are a number of events that take place in this mountain range that are almost identical to the area the Jersey Devil ones take place and some other stories that we've talked about. In addition, I want you to keep in mind as well that protected areas in Canada and the US are way more common than they are in other countries, especially at that time.
Oh, it's because we got all the UFOs, Nick.
Right. And our government tries to cover that stuff up. But I don't think there were a large number, because I actually specifically looked into this knowing that you'd come across this. There
100%.
were not a bunch of protected areas in Russia at that time.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, keep that in mind. But let's listen to these parts.
Then there were the more fantastical theories involving encounters with cryptids like the Yeti or other mysterious creatures that could have led to the hikers' strange behavior and gruesome injuries. Yet, the Dyatlov Pass incident is not the only mystery to haunt the Ural Mountains. Over the years, a slew of other inexplicable events and odd occurrences have cast a shadow over this remote wilderness, intertwined with ancient legends and folklore that add to its mystique. Mysterious lights have been seen dancing across the night sky, defying explanation and igniting the imaginations of those who witness them. These luminous specters are said to be the souls of long-departed travelers, still searching for their way home. Unusual phenomena like the sudden and unexplained disappearances of animals and people have been recorded, leaving a chilling trail of unanswered questions. Some locals believe these vanishings are linked to the Mountain's Eye, a legendary portal to another realm.
So,
Rick, all I can say is there's your Bigfoot. You're welcome, brother. Listen, we brought it to you the same day.
So we've heard all of these things in other stories linked to national parks and protected areas.
Yes.
Like I do believe that even during some of our UFO talk, you talked about portals or other dimensions.
Correct.
As well. We've got the dancing lights across the sky. They're attributing them to dead hikers, but those could easily be UFOs. Strange cryptids in the mountain, and there were multiple of those, just like our other stories. So the only difference between this and the national reserves in Canada and the US is we actually label them as that and tell people don't do anything here, don't dig here, don't.
Makes sense. Listen, they're just putting it out there. Listen, you don't need to go digging there.
Right. You know, it's like you can't turn over a rock in a national park. Like
it's
any
like
of that
everything
stuff.
else. All these mysterious things that we talk about, and it's funny because different people have different opinions of like it's very polarizing. When you look at something, you typically have a camp of 50-50. 50% go, you're crazy, this doesn't exist. You're so dumb for thinking this exists. Then you got the other half that's like, there's so much to it, and there's this and there's that. But you know what I always notice? There's always a pattern in every single one of these stories, whether we're covering a haunting, whether we're covering UFOs, whether we're covering the Mothman, or like, we talked about the Mothman, we talked about the New Jersey Devil. Both had things that was very similar. The UFO stories, they always have something similar. But you would know the biggest thing that I notice in all of the stories is we talk about dimensions no matter what we talk about.
That's right.
And it makes me wonder, and again, I've not done enough research to know exactly what I'm talking about, but even science has came to the conclusion that we have multiple dimensions and we can only see the bottom dimension, but all the dimensions above us, it's like looking through a glass bridge. You can see all the way down into the other dimensions. If I was looking at a house to where I could see through the house and I could see different people in the house and I could go into those sections, that's the equivalent of what we're dealing with. They're looking down on us going, that's what that is. And it's hard for my brain to wrap around it. And I'm assuming that's most people. But the fact that even science goes, there's multiple dimensions, but we don't understand what that means. We understand the concept, but we don't know how it applies. Every single one of these paranormal experiences, no matter what it is, every single one of them talks about multiple dimensions.
And just to riff off what you're saying, there's something called the flat pan thought experiment, where something exists in a 2D world. They can't even comprehend a 3D world because it would sort of undo their dimensions and how they work. It's like no more than we could understand fifth dimensions, 18 dimensions. We can talk about it, we can think about it, but it's beyond our experience or possibility to experience.
Well, and it makes me, y'all are going to think I'm a whack job. Maybe I won't. Well, I've already started down this path.
It's too late now.
Sometimes this plays into 5 years ago. If someone told me this, I'd been like, use a freaking whack job. But it makes me wonder, as just for funsies is what we'll call this. I don't know any of this is true. What if we truly live in a simulation where what you believe is the reality for each person?
That is something already. It's, well, there's a disorder, I think it would be considered, called a solipsist. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Where they think they're the only real thing and everything is created to be a part of their stage kind of thing.
Sure.
But if it were true, what you postulate were true, you could not know otherwise.
Not true.
No? How would you know otherwise?
So there's golly, I wish I would have known this was coming up. There's an experiment that occurred that science cannot explain currently.
Is this the dual slit experiment or?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't even have to look it up. Good job, Nick. This is why we need both of us. The fact that occurs tells us that there's more to what's going on than what we know. Now, what that is, and what I'm saying is, let's use, for example, if I'm a religious person, right? But I believe there's an afterlife and I believe that there's this and there's that. Based on the fact that I'm a simulation, what's to say that that simulation then doesn't say that's what he believes? Here's his next destination versus you that might be agnostics. Or let's use a better example. Let's say you are Hindu and you believe in reincarnation. Who's to say that that person's thought process then at the end of their life goes into a simulation where that actually applies. Because again, we're talking about, here's a great example for all of you non-gamers out there. I'm going to try to explain something to you. If you play a very dense game, and by dense, what I mean is a 3-dimensional game with a lot of aspects to it. A great example of that, and you guys won't understand what I'm talking about. There's a graphics card that's currently in production, and the graphics are so realistic, it's hard to believe that it's not real video footage. And when they tried to figure out how were they capable of doing that, because it would take so much power to create, they finally came out and they said, well, let's use, for example, and for you with video, this is going to be easier. I'll try to explain it. If on this screen, if this phone exists, for those listening, I'm putting a phone up to the camera. If this is to exist, the fact that I'm putting it in front of the camera, it has to render this phone. But if it's over here and you know the phone's over here, does it have to render it all the way? No, that's the way the video game works. So
that's called culling, by the way.
Yes, correct. So the fact that you have to render whatever is in the sight, but not the rest, goes back to the dual slit, which is what we're talking about. The fact that they get one answer when they do it one way, and then they say, well, this is what's going to happen. And then they do the second experiment, and it's something completely, it goes from being direct to a wave pattern, makes no sense.
Right.
And science has never proven that. That technically could be a simulation because it's only rendering what you need.
It could be. And I agree with every single thing you said. However, if the simulation is good enough, it might simulate those effects. So you still don't know.
That's true.
You can't prove anything in a world that's absolutely real to you, if it's fabricated or not, unless there's some grand error. But we're talking about an almost perfect simulation.
But what about in the movie The Matrix? They figured it out, Nick. Listen, sometimes things screw up.
Well, if you see 2 black cats in a row, that might be something.
That's simulation, Nick.
But these slits in the wall, whatever. It's black cats or nothing for me, man.
It's very interesting. I went down a rabbit hole one time of simulation. There's actually a lot of websites on glitches in the Matrix, is what they call it. It's very fascinating. I don't know if you've looked into any of that, Nick.
I have, and I feel like I've experienced it.
I've never I might be so dense I didn't even acknowledge that I did, if I did, but.
Well, I'm rational enough to understand that my mind can play tricks on me. So I feel like I've experienced it, but probably the more logical answer is my mind has tricked me into thinking I've experienced it.
I have a video to remind me at the end of this. I'm going to send it to you if I can find it. And it's this woman, and she literally puts her cell phone up and she's recording. You see you're the phone, and you're seeing her going up, and there's another guy that's in front of her that's pointing his camera up. And then you see like 3 or 4 other people doing the same thing in the background. And I'm listening to what's going on before I realize what's happening. And she goes, "Can you believe this is happening?" And goes, "I've never seen anything like this before." And they're looking up in the sky at a cloud. And it wasn't until I acknowledged the fact that it's only half the cloud.
Right.
So it's a huge cloud, and it's like it was cut in half. And one half of the sky is clear and the other half has cloud. But the cloud is perfectly, it's like they took a knife and took half of it away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's no way this is fake, because you can see everyone just staring at this thing going, what is happening?
That's when the developer of the simulation got some of their textures off Google image search. That's what happens.
That's what happens, Nick. They went cheap on this world.
Way off top, kind of.
Technically, we're still in it because we're multiple dimensions, Nick. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The fact that there's multiple dimensions tell me that all of these things potentially apply.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree to that. I think we've got a pretty sound and solid theory about what this is.
UFOs with the ray guns.
Well,
Said that like 20 minutes ago.
I'm like skipping the ray gun part, but I'm going UFO. And the eye of the mountain could be a way that they travel between dimensions and back again to cover great distances. Because I think
That's
we've
what I'm
sort
saying.
of
There's
covered.
something
Yeah.
that applies into that, Nick. See this? I know you said we got off topic. I don't think we did.
No, I don't think we
we're
did
still on
after all.
topic.
I think we were just going so far into the topic that we just had to pull ourselves out a little bit.
See,
But I
this is the
think
way
this is
my
all of
brain works, though.
Yeah.
See, this is the way my brain works because they all apply. Every
Mhm.
single one of these apply. Like I feel like I'm Mulder and I've got
Yeah.
my little board and I'm putting this pin right here and I'm taking the yarn, I'm circling it and I'm going, look over here, Scully. And I'm putting it over there. I'm like 95% sure I figured all this out.
and I'm
All
like,
of it.
Mulder, it's midnight. I want to go get a sandwich. No, just kidding.
Possibly. Possibly.
But this does all fit. And I don't know if people are going to agree with us on this or not, but we can relate things here that I've not heard people relate. And we do this quite frequently. I think we've got a weird synergistic mind thing going on here.
Correct.
But I think this is a reasonable explanation for all these things. The combination of the low frequency sound, possibly UFOs in their defense system. And that's what I'm sticking with.
Who's to say
Mhm.
if a UFO goes from one dimension to another that it doesn't cause some of these things?
I
a
like that.
frequency.
I like that.
Think about it, because it has to apply, right? If you're creating
Mhm.
gravity, it's going to create a hertz range.
Right. I think that's
What if
natural.
it came in? What if it came into this dimension,
Mhm.
caused a reverberation?
Unintentionally
See, this is
harm these
why-
people.
Easily. I don't know. I don't
Right.
have a spacecraft
Yeah.
government. I
Yet.
don't have anything
Yet.
like that. Wink, wink. But if I was, my unintelligent brain would tell me that it would have to do something.
Yeah.
It would have to create some type of radiation, I would assume,
Right.
because what radiation is basically the destruction of atoms. My brain is piecing this all together. I'm sorry for the silence. I'm just trying to
I can see your
go down the
eyes
rabbit hole.
going.
Yeah, it's processing.
Yeah,
Process.
processing.
Process.
Simulation is having a memory slowdown.
It's
No,
crazy.
you've really taken this places that I hadn't anticipated and stuff that I hadn't thought of, which is fascinating.
My brain's a weird place, Nick. It's very weird.
It's necessary to being a mystery
I don't know if
detective.
It's necessary.
A
There's
supernatural
a lot of people
detective.
like, that's not necessary. This guy's a whack job.
Well, if you think that, don't tell us about it. We don't want to hear that negativity.
We don't want to know.
Yeah, we
It's
don't need that
fine. Listen.
negativity in our lives.
Exactly. Keep that on the Reddit machine.
That's right.
Oh, man.
So
So I see there's like one little segment left, Nick. Does
Yeah.
that just close it out? or
this
there
is
more
just the
info?
conclusion.
Okay.
So if you want to
Are
add
we
more
ready
to
for
this,
the conclusion?
I think so. Unless you want to add more to your theory, but I think we've summed it up really well.
My brain is all over the place on this. Honestly, I don't think I'll be able to piece it all together for a couple of days.
Oh,
but
you're
my
not
brain is
sleeping tonight.
processing it all.
I knew this would be a
Oh,
good
yeah,
one.
there's
I
no
knew
way.
this would be.
There's no way. That's the thing. We tell these stories and I literally apply them to other stories and how things fit.
Yeah.
And this it fits a lot of things.
It checks
a lot
all the
of things.
boxes you were talking about earlier.
And on top of that, there's other stories that I'm handling, some from Canada, which will be in future
Yes.
podcasts and lists. But things apply right now that we've not even talked about
Right.
that fits this story also.
Nice. I can't wait to hear those. Because like I said, I think we're in some kind of audio drama where we're getting in deeper and deeper each episode.
There's literally, okay, I've made my determination. It'll be the next podcast that I do
Oh,
that brings some of these principles to the surface, and you'll be like, man, this does apply to that also, which is
I
weird.
can't wait. We're going to get abducted any moment now. Like, this is it.
They're going to go blink. They know too much.
Yeah. I hope you guys are ready to check out these other dimensions.
Exactly. You're going to have to go interdimensional now.
Yeah, right.
All right, let's close this thing out. Hold on, Nick. Let's pop this thing.
Let's do it.
Ancient legends and folklore speak of supernatural forces that roam the mountainous terrain. Tales of shape-shifting spirits and guardian entities that protect the wilderness have been passed down through generations, adding an air of mysticism to the region. Hikers and adventurers have reported unsettling encounters with the unknown, strange apparitions, eerie sounds, and inexplicable sensations that defy rational explanation. These stories, woven into the fabric of Euro folklore, have kept the mountain's secrets for centuries.
So, Nick, obviously, we talked about that, or we heard that part. Here's the deal. First thing that came to my mind, and I'll guarantee you saw
gasped.
the light bulb go blink.
You gasped. You've audibly gasped.
You know, it applies, folks. Listen, I don't care what y'all say. Skinwalker Ranch. Mm-hmm. We keep talking about that too. And what do they say about Skinwalker Ranch? Interdimensional portal every time.
Right. Yep. Just like this, just like other cases we've looked at already.
And it always goes back to even Native American folklore, because the Native Americans talked about a series of things that always applies back to very similar things here. In fact, if you go back and you look at Egyptian, God, I can't go into it. Yes, I can. Egyptian artifacts. There's a series of artifacts that also looks interdimensional.
Mm-hmm. I think I've seen these kind of things.
Yes. Which again plays in. In fact, we are just now discovering technology that's allowed to be released to the public. For years, we're talking decades, possibly at least a century, they would not allow some of these artifacts to come out, which proves that there was technology before, when the pyramids were created, that exists. And I have a hypothesis on that also that we can't cover on this podcast.
Okay.
But I have a hypothesis on that also, which would apply to this, but I've got other future things.
Well, this is like a cliffhanger. You got to tune in soon to get the rest of the hypothesis.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because there's very interesting stuff that's coming out of Egypt as we speak within the last year. Interesting things.
Nice.
Because you know Graham Hancock, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. He's explained a lot of things, but he was considered a quack.
Right.
But now some of the stuff he's talked about 15, 20 years ago, they're discovering is correct.
Sometimes the only thing that separates a quack and a genius is time.
100%.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though. I got to get me one of them Bigfoot shirts, because that has put you on fire this week.
Man, I'm just...
This is like working your brain. I don't know if it's the material or what.
It's very slick. It feels really good.
Yeah. Man. It's making you slick. I think like this is... Yeah, you're firing on all cylinders. I tell you, I need one of those.
Listen.
I feel like I'm in a slower dimension.
Bigfoot shirt, brother. Just pieces it all together. Yeah. All these things just apply. Skinwalker Ranch, multi-dimensions, aliens, multi-dimensions, at least 3. We believe there's 9. Goes into paranormal. We always talk about how they can go from their dimension into ours. There's another hypothesis I heard on it recently, that there's almost a decay factor, which I've never heard that hypothesis until the last 3 months, 2 months, 3 months of doing research for my podcast. Okay. There's a lot of interesting things, but they all tie together.
Oh, it's those pins and yarn boards. They're actually useful for this kind of thing. And I actually think I need one of those. I'm going to make one of those, Nick, and I'm going to hang it up on the side. Yeah. Set one of those up. I'm going to. I'd like to see that. And then every single week,
we'll put a picture on our Instagram of how we tied a yarn to something.
Yeah. Yeah.
How cool
we'll
would that
prove
be?
that we're nuts. It'll be cool, but we're
Exactly.
nuts. Now
1000%.
we've crossed the line. The moment you get that board up, we've crossed the line. We're a different kind of podcast now.
Man, this is such a good podcast. I'm so excited about this episode.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
a good episode.
I wish everyone was listening to it right now and they could just
I know.
tell us. Like,
Or think about it. If they had things in the comments that even gave us concepts we're not even thinking about. This is why
Yeah.
you got to put it in the comments. Or if you're no matter where you're listening, there should be a way to comment or go to our social medias and be like, did you guys ever think about this or that? Because the collective of our brains as a community could do wonders.
For sure. And if you think we're crazy, you can tell us. It's all right. We can take it.
Exactly. Just do it
I
where
mean,
it
you're
belongs on
wrong,
Reddit.
but you're wrong. But
You're completely wrong.
I mean, like,
We're
it's not,
professionals.
I would never deny someone the opportunity to be wrong.
I agree with that. I agree with that hypothesis.
Yeah.
It's all very interesting. I'm tying so many things together in my head. I apologize
know.
if I go silent.
Yeah,
from
you're
time
going to be
time.
up
I'm
all
trying to
night.
piece it. I really am. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole when we get off this podcast for sure, because I'm going to look
Oh,
things
yeah.
up.
But let's tie it off. And then we can get into more research later. And maybe if we need to do an update, we can do that sometime too.
We can always do that, Nick. Do you want to listen to this last section?
No, you know what? Drop it off. It's just descriptive. I think we've done such interesting thought patterns here. It would just take away from the overall episode, to be honest. And I don't mind saying that.
It's like we've solved this thing.
Yeah,
early.
we've done it.
Hopefully y'all come to a different hypothesis or concept or idea that we've not come across. Obviously, like I said, hit us up on our social medias. Big thing. Please, 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 no matter where you're listening to our podcast, rate us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can like us or shoot, go a little crazy, share it with some of your other crazy conspiracy theory friends. That's how people find people like us. And we would definitely appreciate
bring them
that.
in.
You guys have absolutely been knocking them down, just absolutely crushing it. And we definitely appreciate that. Again, Halloween episode's coming up.
Got 1
just
week
around the corner. 1 week.
Yeah. Get us
I
some
expect to
stories.
see a draft in my email in 5 minutes.
And 5 minutes and the time it takes for this to come out.
Exactly. Well, everybody, y'all have been doggone rock stars. Is there anything else you can think of, Nick, that we haven't hit up on?
No, we've solved it. If I had a file folder right now, I'd just close it on camera.
Closed.
Yep. Case closed.
Well, everybody, until we see y'all in the next video, next episode, goodbye.
See you later.